I'm Sara Groff-Palermo, and right now I have no idea how to answer that question. I used to be a designer, a UX designer, and I've spent the last year working on art and programming and design work, and so now I'm about to start grad school, but just programmer, artist. Well, so p5js in some ways I would say is a modernization of one of the more classic creative coding tools. So people who come to code from art often have different expectations and different desires than people who started off being programmers, and processing originally was a tool to make it easy for people to do that. And originally it was just ran on people's computers, but now as the web gets bigger and bigger, p5js is a way to use processing on the web. So that's why I'd call it a modernization of processing, to sort of bring that to a new generation. So there's actually two answers to that question, I would say. So on the one hand, educators use it to help teach art students to program, to introduce them to programming to begin with. And in that way, it's a very school-focused tool, but it's also just used by other new media artists who want to get drawings up quickly, basically. Yeah, a whole bunch of so it's a contributors conference, so a whole bunch of people who like to work on p5js in their spare time, or sometimes as part of their jobs, depending on who supports it, all got together to get a whole bunch of work done. Since it's mostly a volunteer effort, coordinating people and getting things done can sometimes take a while, and you always have to just communicate through the web. So we got everyone together to make a lot of differences, both on the code itself, changing things like deep inside, but also it seems like a lot of the work has been about making the community stronger and better, and making the setup friendlier and easier to learn, whether it's about teaching people about things like debugging, which, is really interesting because it's an important skill that sort of nobody ever teaches you. So really explicitly teaching people how to debug and making debugging less scary, I think is probably one of the biggest contributions, even more so than the code contributions that we're doing, which are great and useful and will make it really robust, but I think we'll see even more payoff for making it friendlier. Well, I think it's important to getting continuing work done by bringing the community together so that we know each other as more than just a tiny little 80 pixel by 80 pixel picture on a computer screen. So I think it's super important to just make the community stronger, both by letting us get to know each other and by disseminating the values. Again, all of the work on sort of the code of conduct and our contributor statements and really defining what p5js wants to be is important, because I think it seeds within all of us the ability to, again, take that back to our own communities in smaller groups and keep spreading it, sort of like tiny little dandelions or something. So I think it's important for that reason. And it's just important that programming projects are kind of like sharks. If they don't keep moving forward, they die. And this is keeping it up to date and keep moving forward to making it something bigger. Well, so I'm also doing Google Summer of Code for p5js. So a really important part of coming to the conference for me was getting to know the code base and getting to know how everything was set up, so that when I go back and spend the summer working on it, I can make really good, strong contributions because I understand better what we're doing. And it also just makes me a better programmer. A lot of my projects, because I do a lot of art projects, are done by myself. And I've learned a lot about how to work with groups of people on bigger code bases, which I think will be useful just sort of, just for my own edification, but also, in a very practical sense down the road, working on other projects, wanting to get jobs, knowing that I can work on a big project is really important and helpful. How nice and smart everyone is. I think that's the most impressive thing. Our community is amazing. And when we had the show and tell day and I just got to see the kinds of work that everyone does, before everyone was nice and friendly and it was oh, you're great. And then you see the work they do and you're just floored that people who do such great work also are so nice and care so much about their community. That's been really surprising and pleasant. I honestly think a lot of it has to do with CS culture. That computer science culture is very, very different, I have found, the more I do coding, from sort of humanities culture. And I think that it's not an interesting problem to some groups of people to say, how do we make this useful for artists? The user experience problem isn't interesting to a lot of, big CS corporations. I think that's a really big reason why, is that I don't think they see it. And I think it's hard to make work that really succeeds. That in the cases where they're like, oh, we tried to make an art thing, or we tried to make this thing for beginners and it didn't work, it's because they didn't have the deep understanding of artists and the sort of assumptions that artists are going to bring to things. And if you want something to be easy to pick up, you have to have sort of that design sense behind it of who it's for and what those people are looking for. And I think that standard computer companies still really struggle with that. I'm just super psyched that I got to come and work on this. It made me feel good about the people that I know and the communities I got to work on, and it made me feel good about the skills that I have, that I could really contribute things. And I learned that like my superpower is complicating things and asking like the philosophical questions behind bugs, which is super silly, but I really loved it, and I'm glad I got to learn a little bit more about myself too.